As the great and the good gather in Glasgow for the COP26 conference, our fear is that when it comes to climate change, talk is cheap. So our message is very simple. Stop burning stuff.
Love them or loathe them, young people like Greta Thunberg have a point. Governments the world over are just not acting quickly enough. So in this special episode, we're going to be focusing on the technologies that can tackle climate change here and now. Robert's going to be talking to the pioneers that are spearheading the shift to sustainable energy and electric vehicles.
But before we do, Helen takes a closer look at the science behind climate change and how combustion is the chief culprit when it comes to emissions. Over to you, Dr. Chesky.
Each one of us has three life support systems: our own body, planet Earth, and the infrastructure of our civilization. Climate change is a problem because it puts the planet and the infrastructure into conflict with each other, and we need both to stay alive. So how does our planet work? Well, it's got two major rules. Energy flows in from the sun, hangs around for a bit on Earth, and then flows away into space. So Earth is just borrowing energy from the universe, acting like a reservoir. And while it's on Earth, all of that energy runs the planetary engine, the winds, the ocean currents, and life. The energy acts on matter, and the atoms that are on Earth are the only atoms that we have. There is no away unless we throw valuable atoms off our planet, which would be a waste. So here are the two rules of Earth. Energy flows through, and matter, the stuff, goes round and round. So what have we humans been doing? Well, we have burned a lot of fossil fuel, and all of that burning releases carbon dioxide, a lot of carbon dioxide. And when that gets into the atmosphere, it slows down the energy flow away into space. It basically bungs up the plug hole. So what's happening is that as you slow down that flow of energy away, energy accumulates inside the Earth system. So how does a planet store energy? Well, mostly it's stored as heat, and that's why climate change has been known as global warming. All of that extra energy will also change the way the engine works. It'll change wind patterns, rain and drought patterns, and where animals can live and migrate to. Those are the consequences of climate change, and they're already happening. So what should we do about all of this? You can try to apply sticking plasters to all the things that are changing, but we'd need an endless supply of sticking plasters and we'd never get rid of the underlying problem. Carbon dioxide causes other problems like changing the chemistry of the ocean, so it isn't just about the heating. But the solution to all of this is clear. We need to unclog our atmosphere and let energy flow away into space at a faster rate. And that means we need less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere urgently. And that means we need to stop burning stuff now.
The sheer scale of this problem can make it seem insurmountable, but the good news is that the technologies that we need already exist. In fact, they are already being deployed around the world. They have momentum, but further acceleration from governments is critical. Significant progress has been made already, and it's important to share the success stories that show what is possible. Here in the UK, while gas still predominates, wind and increasing efficiency has played a huge role in pushing coal off the electricity system in less than a decade. And as the British Isles is blessed with considerable coastline, we are only at the beginning of an extraordinary shift to wind power. Now, most countries have their own renewable resources to draw from. Australia, for example, has an abundance of solar, and the nation is going through a rapid transformation from laggard to leader as the cost of solar plummets. South Australia also boasts the Tesla Big Battery, and the 194 megawatt-hour grid-connected energy storage system has alleviated the use of gas-fired generators and provided grid stability too. When the Loy Yang A coal generator tripped in December 2017, the Hornsdale battery delivered 7.3 megawatts to the grid in mere milliseconds. While progress on electricity, whether it be generated by wind, solar or hydro, and aided and abetted by batteries, has been dramatic, in the UK at least, there is a big question mark about heat. Again, we believe it's electrification that will be by far and away the biggest beneficiary of this switch. Heat pumps in particular are a success story in Europe, even in the colder climes of Scandinavia, and there are tens of millions of hyper-efficient air source heat pumps already in operation. What's more, when it comes to the electrification of heat, other options are emerging too. When it comes to electric cars, Norway again is leading the way, with pure electric cars accounting for the vast majority of cars now sold in the country. But it is not an isolated incident, it is spreading across Europe. And even in combustion engine obsessed Germany, 1 in 5 cars sold is now pure electric. Across the border, the Netherlands is showing that there is another way. Dutch bike culture has been given a boost by electric bikes, with e-bikes now accounting for more than half of bike sales there. It goes to show that we don't necessarily need to replace one car with another, as electric micromobility brings in with it an array of alternatives including scooters, bikes, trikes, mopeds and microcars. In terms of other electric vehicles, China is blazing a trail when it comes to electric buses and electric taxis. While we wring our hands about trialling a handful of buses, consider Chinese cities like Shenzhen, which on its own has a combination of more than 40,000 electric buses and taxis in operation today. In summary, we have the solutions. It's time to roll up our sleeves and deploy these proven technologies as rapidly as possible. And now it's time to talk to the leaders who are actively working to scale up cleaner, greener technologies about what we all need to do to stop burning stuff. Todd, can I start with you? I mean, can you tell us about what your business is and how you see it developing in the future?
Yeah, so the overall goals of GridServe are to deliver sustainable energy on such a scale that we can help move the needle on climate change. Clearly quite a thing to take on, but it's down to us alone, this generation, given the timeframes we have available to us. And the way that we're going about it is we're building a new ecosystem that stops burning stuff, topical for this, which we call sun to wheel. So we're generating clean energy from solar projects. We are then using batteries to kind of balance that energy. We are installing new charging infrastructure, so we've just delivered over 100 charging locations in the last 100 days across the UK. And we're putting that energy into electric vehicles, and that kind of in terms of the electric vehicle side, we're leasing electric vehicles, and every person who leases one from us, we plant 100 trees as well, which reduces the carbon from the last vehicles that were burning stuff. So kind of that's the overall plan that we have, and we're delivering that in the UK, and we're looking to scale it up across the world.
Jordan, My Energy, really, I think a very close company to Fully Charged. I met you when you literally just started. Just give us a brief history of what you're doing and how fast it's changed, because you've grown so quickly, it's extraordinary.
So we look at the industry very similar to GridServe and Toddington, but more on a residential focus. So we manufacture eco-smart home devices for EV charging and heating. Basically our products work with and encourage people to adopt solar energy within the home or switch to a green energy tariff. So we do the same for balance in the home and just moving the energy around a little bit smarter in the home, making sure that we stop burning stuff for the energy consumption. But what we have seen, the industry is just skyrocketing from that time in Orkney where we had a prototype charger in the woods running off a wind turbine. We were shipping 35 units a week at that time. We're now getting close to 3,000 a week, so you can see the scale in such a short space of time of and we manufacture all in the UK as well, which is close to our hearts, for keeping the production in the UK and trying to look at that supply chain as well, for the whole circular economy. So.
And Quentin, you and I have been, I think it's fair to say, knocking around on telly for quite a few years here and there. I think we're roughly the same age. You've been doing it longer. You're much more professional than me.
But we've also been driving electric cars for years and years and years, and that's great, since 2009 in fact.
Yeah. But then you're now working with British Volt, which is really fascinating.
So I'm a kind of EV evangelist and always have been, and for me, batteries, there will be no energy transition without batteries, and I don't think we quite get that in this country. So British Volt have this 93-hectare site up in Northumberland, and are going to be the UK's premier manufacturer and research and development of batteries as well. So the big problem here is, Robert, that if we don't have batteries here in the UK, the entire motor industry will go to where the batteries are, and that will be abroad. And we don't want that. We need to keep the UK motor industry here. We need to supply domestic-made, researched batteries. So British Volt are really well tied into people like the Warwick Manufacturing Group at University and the Faraday Institute, and they're researching new electrochemistries for batteries like lithium iron phosphate and solid state and stuff like that. It's about green batteries, but also developing battery chemistries so they are lighter, they are more dense, the range are longer, the recycling is greater, and design batteries that can be used again and again and again, sometimes 4 life cycles into static energy as well. So it's really, really exciting.
Jordan, I mean, can you talk about this, the fact that we need to develop a circular economy? This goes beyond anything to do with electric vehicles. It just generally, in the way we live, what we have done is dig stuff up, generally burn it and just ignore it. And now we've really got to sort of change the whole way we think of manufacturing and how we use things.
That's it. I mean, it's going to be a global effort, right? Everybody has got to be on the same mindset to make something truly green, because it's very difficult to have something completely carbon neutral straight away. But there's things that you can do.
Think of today as a clean sheet of paper. You know, all of the solutions that are needed, at least a vast majority, but probably all of them that are needed to really fix climate change within the timeframes required, already exist.
Yeah.
You know, and the situation we're in is such a fragile one because there isn't much time. You know, this is on our watch. You know, this is on our watch, everybody, now available today. It's not, I've got young kids, it's not on their watch. And the solutions, you know, are within our reach. You know, all people need to do is just deliver and get on with it. And we did have a few people say, oh, you know, oh, grid server, who are you? You know, they don't say that anymore. No. Are you really going to build that? Yeah. And we have, you know, but it really is just the beginning of the journey.
Because I thought the same, oh, there's a fancy render of something that will never get built, and nice idea and everything. And I got there and I was like, oh my God, there's people that want it as well, on a grand scale, because as a little manufacturer, we couldn't build something like that, you know, but we know that that's what's needed, and batteries are needed for us to have this whole, and it's industry working together, and then politicians, policymakers, regulators not holding back on innovation, listen to us.
But the politicians, we need to help them help us make the right choices. So up in Northumberland, we've got 93 hectares, we're digging the ground up. You would say, okay, well, why are you putting it up there? Why don't you put it in the middle of the country for logistic reasons? And the reason why British Volt put it there is that there's the North Sea interconnector coming from Norway, so completely renewable electricity coming into that national grid area. You've got the wind farms over there. So it's possible to have an entire battery factor, 93 hectares in renewable energy, powered completely. So the low carbon battery is a reality. And then if you make all the recycled materials within the factory and the battery's recyclable, then the embedded carbon comes down and down and down to almost a negligible level. And politicians need to understand that. So my message to the people at COP is know about this stuff, understand it, because it's all new and it's all new technology. And some of them need to drive electric cars. Yes. And charge them, as we have done all those duty cycles, thousands and thousands of miles. Then you'll understand how wonderful this transition is going to be.
Yeah. What you would like to see come out of COP26? I mean, what you would like them to say?
Yeah, just a little bit more urgency. Yeah. I'm going to go with the Greta Thunberg effect, because, you know, enough empty words Like, let's actually take some action now, because I feel like everyone can say the right things and, you know, for the cameras or whatever, like, no, it's done with all the fluffy stuff. Like, let's actually see some solid action, because we are running out of time. It's as simple as that. That is important.
Yeah, I think, Torrington, I mean, I presume you're much in alignment with that.
Yeah,
Get on with it. Basically.
Absolutely.
Get on with it.
Yeah, but I've been attending a lot of these. You know, the first COP I went to was COP. Is it COP14 in 2008 before Copenhagen? It was Poznan and then Copenhagen, and you know, there's a lot of like people making promises and a lot of words and a lot of this and a lot of that, and action is absolutely essential. But for me, what I just want to come out of it is people go, you know what, we're actually going to do this. You know, a bit like when, you know, the Conservative, you know, government, like Theresa May, they changed the legislation from we're going to reduce emissions by X% by this, excluding shipping, excluding that, by this arbitrary date and time. And it was like, what does that mean? You know, to suddenly net zero by this date, and by the way, we're going to try and do it a lot earlier. You know, and if something can come out of government, you know, come out of COP, just the world coming together and going, you know what, we're not going to play around the edges, we're going to do this. You know, then there's companies like GridServe, like My Energy, like, you know, British Volt and others that are just going to rise to the occasion. I mean, all we really need is clarity and certainty, and on that basis we'll make it happen.
The government needs to understand that the opportunities here, this is the biggest commercial opportunity for this country since oil, coal, the railways, the Industrial Revolution, all that sort of stuff. And if you think batteries for EVs will enable us to have batteries for aviation, for maritime, and for static energy storage, for towns and cities, and it will change the world. Batteries will change the world, and I don't think they get that. And they've got to grab this, and there's a tearing urgency to it.
But, you know, there's technology within the homes as well. You know, there's millions and millions of homes. Like, they're little energy consumption microgrids, essentially, and it's how the whole system works together and balances and supports the network. Everybody says the grid will melt if you plug in EVs. Technology already exists. You know, it's what we do. It's balance the home, it's balance the grid. You know, I think government and COP people need to understand and listen to innovators within the industry.
I just think we need to focus on solutions, whatever they are, that are as affordable as possible, ideally less expensive than polluting alternatives, like electric vehicles. You know, the life cycle cost of electric vehicles is less than petrol and diesel now, as is renewable energy, and ones that can just be deployed now. Like there's lots of distraction technologies out there that people get very excited about, but you know, I just say, look, you know, is this something which is commercially viable? Not in like 20, 30, 40 years, but like within the timeframes required to address climate change. Is it? And is it something that people are actually going to do because it can be deployed quick enough, it works, and it's economically viable, ideally socially, environmentally as well. And if it is, let's focus on that stuff, and let's give that probably more than 80% of the focus. And I just do get a bit concerned that there's other technology in the periphery that sound great and people get quite excited about, but are a bit of a distraction to the biggest problem that we've got, which is addressing climate change.
And I do think, the longer we've been using this quite, initially quite naff term, stop burning stuff, because it's ridiculous and we know we can't possibly stop burning everything, but it's quite a good guide. Because you think, well, wait a minute, can you do that? Does that need to be? Do you need to burn stuff to do what you're going to do? And if you don't, you think, well, that's probably a fairly good guide that it's going to be cheaper in the long run, it's going to be better in the long run, it's going to be lower carbon in the, that as a sort of guiding principle has kind of held solid for the last 10 years.
I don't think people are very conscious about how much stuff we burn. Yeah. If you said to somebody, how much stuff did you burn today? Yeah. And most people say, I didn't burn anything. Yeah. Did you go for a ride in your car? Yeah.
Did you boil a kettle on a gas cooker?
But actually you did. In the middle of your car is something that just burnt, 300 million year old dinosaur kind of juice. And, they're just not really aware of that. Yeah. And obviously not doing that is helpful. And the reason we like solar energy so much is that the energy that people are burning today is actually stored sunlight from hundreds of millions of years ago. That's all it was. Plants absorbed through photosynthesis sun energy. Some of that stayed as plants, some of it got eaten by animals, it all got compressed. Eventually you end up with fossil fuels. But we know now that that there's consequences of extracting all of that and burning it. Whereas if you can just absorb that energy directly that turns up every day, you can look up rather than looking down is another kind of way of looking at it. Just look up, is another thought. There's a solution out here somewhere, where is it? I'm sure there's a solution. Then then we have everything we need. Unfortunately, it's now less expensive to use free sun energy because there is already a fission reactor in the sky. That we don't have to, that works.
Yeah, that is burning.
It is burning, but it's a long way away.
There's a flaw in the plan, damn it. Now, when it comes to technologies that eliminate emissions, electric cars are often the poster child. And the great thing about pure electric vehicles is there are no emissions at the tailpipe, because there is no tailpipe. What's more, whether it's by opting for a clean electricity supplier or generating your own power with solar panels, unlike their combustion engine counterparts, electric cars actually allow for the possibility that you do not need to rely on fossil fuel power plants, and we are not simply moving the tailpipe elsewhere. But what about embodied emissions, the emissions that are released to manufacture the car in the first place? Well, it is possible to clean that process up too, and several car makers are seriously making a difference, none more so than Polestar. So let's talk to Fredrika Claren from Polestar about their pioneering approach. So, Fredrika, can you tell us about Polestar's objectives when it comes to net zero?
Sure. We've learned a lot during our product development, and we use life cycle assessment to estimate the climate impact of the choices that we're making. And when we did that for Polestar 2, we so clearly saw that electric vehicles offer us a route to climate neutral mobility. And even though they are not 100% clean in any way, we want to be transparent with that, they come with a footprint. They are a climate solution already today. So if you choose a Polestar 2 and you charge it with renewable energy, you can halve the climate impact than if you would have chosen a petrol car. So they have an amazing impact already today that we need to tap into. But we also saw that we can go for full decarbonization. So as a company, we want to become climate neutral by 2040, and that gives us a good margin until 2050, when we know as a world we need to reach net zero emissions. But we also want to talk about the fact that we need to see a decrease in emissions now. We need to bend the curve now, and we have this decade, the climate decade, to really find solutions and start implementing them as soon as possible. So we wanted to create this sense of urgency that we in the industry and we internally at Polestar need to do more. We need to take this climate solution that EVs are already today and make them even better. So we decided to launch a moonshot goal to create a climate neutral car by 2030. We call it the Polestar Zero project.
So how does that extend to the materials you use and the manufacturing process as well? And are you thinking about how you can recycle those materials at the end of life?
That is where the big impacts lie. So in our life cycle assessment again, we so clearly see where the impact, the climate impact stems from. And it's the battery going into the car, it's the steel and the aluminium that has the highest impact when you look at Polestar 2. So of course we focus a lot on those three areas. We need to secure renewable energy for the production of metals and minerals. We need to secure a high degree of circularity, so looking at recycled content, but also reuse of parts, for example. So renewable energy and circularity will be solutions that we tap into to really secure that we get down to climate neutrality on the components and the materials in the car.
And what would you like to see from our political leaders at COP26?
We at Polestar believe that we are stuck in somewhat of a climate echo chamber. So we hear a lot of great commitments from business leaders and policymakers, which we applaud. It's great that everyone is finally setting net zero targets. But actually when we scrutinize those targets, we see that they are simply not enough. It will not take us on this pathway where we actually don't increase the temperature above 1.5 degrees. So at COP26, we really want to inspire others with what we do in setting bold targets and having clear actions like Polestar 0. And we also want to talk about the fact that we need to become more transparent in what we do. We cannot just blurt out a target or a commitment or a goal. We actually have to secure now that our stakeholders, our consumers, investors, everyone that should be along for this ride, that they know what we do and how we progress. And that is also why we have decided to publish the carbon footprint of all of our cars. We have something that we call a product sustainability declaration, where you will see the carbon footprint for all of our cars from Polestar 2 leading up to Polestar 0. And when we deliver Polestar 0, it will clearly state a 0 ton CO2 on the product sustainability declaration.
We love futuristic technologies, from solid-state batteries to renewable hydrogen, and from electric flight to nuclear fusion. But we have to accept that at the moment, these technologies are not ready to deploy at scale.
And there are some red herrings out there. From blue fossil hydrogen to carbon capture and storage that threaten to distract us from what we really need to do in the here and now.
So here is the fully charged list of today technologies, the technologies we need to focus on rolling out now.
Let's start with electric cars. While we believe the world needs more public transport and fewer cars, we're clear that those that are on the road should be all electric.
We really see a need to stress how important the transition in the energy system is to support the electrification of transport. We need to charge these vehicles with renewable energy. That is, as I said earlier, when we see this amazing impact in halving the emissions.
And of course, once you own an electric car, your focus is going to switch to how you charge it and the energy that you need to do that.
The amazing thing about charging your EV at home is that you can do it in so many different ways. You can do it super cost effective, you can do it green, you can do it for potentially free if you've got solar panels, and that is smug when you're driving around on sunshine.
And what about if you can't charge an electric car, or if you're a high mileage user?
I would say the charging infrastructure in the UK is improving. We, as an example, have now, in the last 100 days, completed the upgrade of over 100 sites in the most strategic locations across the motorway network, and that's made a massive difference. We know that because we're charging over 50,000 vehicles every month. We're putting over enough energy to drive 5 million miles an electric vehicle every month. So people are using it, it's working. And in addition to that, we're building electric forecourts, which really give people the absolute confidence, whether they can or they can't charge at home, to charge in a location.
It's not just about electric cars, of course. There is an array of commercial vehicles like vans and trucks to consider.
The migration of commercial vehicles to electrification is an enormous opportunity for society. We know that commercial vehicles today contribute a disproportionate amount of CO2 to the atmosphere. So a very quick and seamless migration to electric vehicles needs to happen as soon as possible.
And not forgetting smaller electric vehicles too.
The exciting thing about electric cars for me is the challenge of getting the weight down of them. Weight is obviously a killer for everything from a dynamics point of view, from a load carrying capability, from a strain on our infrastructure and wear and tear on our roads, for example. And for me it's about efficiency. Doing more with less is essentially what we're trying to do. We're obviously producing a vehicle that can go into the city centre even when it's been pedestrianised, even when the urbanisation and the ULEZ zones, ZEZ zones are coming into force. That different sort of micro-mobility highway that we're starting to see crop up, not just in the UK but across Europe as well, our vehicles fit and work in that scenario. Whether the car is electrified or banned, you need a vehicle to get into that city centre to deliver goods, and that's what we believe we've produced.
Solar is one of the critical technologies at grid scale and at domestic level.
We've got to a point now where not only is it competitive with fossil fuels, but it's actually less expensive. And that's meant that we can now deliver really large solar farms. We actually, as in GridServe, delivered the first really large solar farms in the UK without the requirement for any subsidies at all. And that's essential because we need, not just for people to transition to electric vehicles, but in such a way that all the energy that's being consumed is either zero carbon if you're putting energy directly into an electric vehicle, or net zero carbon.
I can see solar growing in the UK. I mean, we see it firsthand. People that buy electric vehicles tend to start looking at solar panels pretty quickly because they think, how can I charge this the greenest and cheapest way possible? And it's also people that already own solar panels start thinking, I'm going to get an electric car. And what we've seen is the industry sort of off the hold on to the tiger's tail of EV, and I can see solar becoming more and more popular, especially as the price of technology has come down. And when you've got smart technology within the home, the return on investment's a lot quicker, so it still stacks up.
And if solar panels aren't an option for your building, there are energy suppliers that can supply you with sustainable energy.
So what's amazing about wind power is that it's really cheap, it's really readily available, it doesn't use fossil fuels, there's no burning, there's no gas, there's no coal, and it's here on our doorstep. We've got so much of it, and it's already generating more than 20% of the UK's electricity, and there's so much more to do.
So if we look at how energy is generated today, you've got large-scale power stations, typically large-scale gas at the moment, and we have a lot of offshore wind. That will start to become very distributed, and we're going to see a lot more wind generation being put up, and we're going to see a lot more solar generation being put up.
So what Ripple does is we enable individual households to own a tiny part of a large-scale wind farm. At the moment they're onshore, but we're also looking at offshore projects as well, and then those households can get the low-cost green electricity that's produced by their wind farm, supplied to their home via the grid, and then they get savings off their electricity bill every month. So it's an easy way for everyone to own their own source of clean, green, low-cost power.
And of course, whether it's for storing solar energy or for use in your electric car, the battery is an absolutely critical component in the switch away from combustion.
There will be no energy transition without batteries. So if we're going to create all this renewable electricity, we need to store it somewhere. And currently we just don't have the capacity to do that, which is why the National Grid just gives it away. And you can get it really cheaply to power your electric car. But if we don't have batteries to store all of this electricity, we will not be able to do what our ambitions are, which to just burn less and have cleaner air. So batteries are absolutely critical.
When it comes to homes and buildings, heat and hot water remains a huge challenge, but the technologies do exist.
The objective with a heat pump is to encourage customers to move from being fossil fuel based heating, gas, towards electric heating. Now, a heat pump has a coefficient of performance of about 3. What that means is for every kilowatt electricity you put into it, you get about the equivalent of 3 kilowatts of heating out of it. That starts to make electricity consumption, or the cost of electricity for a heat pump, fairly similar to gas, and we'll see that changing, I hope, as the government takes on board the messages we're giving them that we should move green levies from electricity to gas. That means we can get homes to electric heating and reduce the fossil fuel generation on the UK, fossil fuel consumption, and encourage customers to go green.
What excites me most about ground source heat pumps as technology, I think, is that they're the closest replacement to what we now understand as a domestic boiler, but it's completely clean. You can have heat in your home when you want it without burning stuff. Totally sustainable, and it can run at the temperatures that you're used to that would normally heat your home, and you can have a very, very comfortable, a very easily managed, easy to control home where, let's face it, most people don't, unlike me, most people don't get excited about heating their home. Part of the transition, by 2050 we need to decarbonise the UK. And it's all right to think about building new homes, building low carbon homes, but 80% of homes that exist today will still exist in 2050. And we need to decarbonise those. And of great concern is social housing. There are thousands of people that are in fuel poverty. And one of the great things about heat pumps is it enables us to retrofit whole tower blocks at a time. So the Core 364 project We replaced 364 gas boilers across a number of tower blocks, and we leave the consumer, we leave the tenant in a much better position. They have a better heating system, they can control it better, they feel more comfortable, and they're saving money. So really it's win-win for all of the parties there.
And if a heat pump isn't for you, perhaps one of these technologies is.
Yeah, well, look, electrification of heat is hugely exciting. It's been the elephant in the room for decades. Heat pumps are brilliant technology, really exciting. I think our view is that there are lots of homes for which a heat pump is just not going to be the answer. And there are lots of reasons for that. It's cost and space and other things. And unless people get serious about the practical challenges of these things, we're just not going to get the change and the pace of change for heating that we need. And so what we've developed with our ZEB, our zero emission boiler, is a plug and play replacement for a boiler that does the same thing, but doesn't have all the disruption associated with a heat pump. And we think that makes it a really good candidate for driving rapid change in this market. We are a British-based startup. We're manufacturing here in the UK. And we are early stage, but we've had enormous excitement from people all across the country. Actually, a lot of people up in Scotland, but all the way down to Cornwall, and that's because people are desperate to have a solution to decarbonise their home to quickly and more affordably than some of the other options out there. And the fact that we're making them here in Britain is obviously brilliant. And I think British engineering, British innovation, British ingenuity is needed now more than ever. COP26 is a once in a generation opportunity for us to actually make a change. We keep having all these meetings and things, and the trajectory has been the same. There's no visible slowdown in the burning of fossil fuels. It needs to change more quickly.
Heat pumps are a brilliant technology, but they don't always fit every property. So let's look at what you do with apartments or properties where you can't fit an air source heat pump in the garden. There are other technologies such as infrared. So there's a company, NextGen, that makes infrared wallpaper. It's literally wallpaper. You put it on the wall and it's powered off 50 volts AC, and it emits infrared from a graphene layer. And that feels like the heat from the sun. If you're standing outside and the cloud goes over, you can feel the change in temperature from that sunlight. That's infrared, and that's what NextGen are doing.
And if you need to store heat, there are some fantastic thermal storage options too.
Hot water is critical for grid flexibility. The reason is that throughout the UK there's an enormous storage potential within existing hot water cylinders installed in homes throughout the country. Something like 10 times the capacity of Norwich is there in terms of flexibility to absorb surplus wind, surplus solar energy. And with the increasing rollout of heat pumps, we're going to see more and more hot water storage. And so it's going to be critical that that's intelligent and flexible so that we can fit the power demand that we're going to see growing at the right times down our existing infrastructure.
And let's not forget that we can do more simply by using less.
Energy efficiency is underappreciated, whether it's insulation or smart thermostats. There are affordable things we can do today.
So here's a rapid reminder of the technologies that we recommend. as mundane as it sounds, what the world needs is less talking.
There's work to be done and action is needed across the political spectrum to deploy these technologies.
And that's especially the case because some of them are not accessible to everyone yet. What we need is for our leaders to show real leadership and start legislating for and planning for these technologies, because that is what's going to make them affordable for everybody.
So please keep watching Fully Charged, which covers all these topics, electric vehicles and clean technology. And please tell your friends, family, anyone you meet, and share this episode as widely as you can. And have a look at our Stop Burning Stuff manifesto.
What happens next is up to us.